Skydio stands at the forefront of autonomous drone technology in the United States, innovating with advanced AI to deliver drones tailored for law enforcement and governmental applications. Established in 2014, our expertise spans AI, robotics, and electrical vehicle technologies, enabling us to craft the most intelligent flying machines that enhance public safety and operational efficiency. Hey, welcome back to Policing Matters on policeone.com. I'm your host, Jim Dudley, and you're listening, or maybe you're watching us on YouTube, and hopefully you get a chance to check out the YouTube videos and you get to see our guest, and maybe we'll show you some slides or some graphics as well. Well, today we're talking about artificial intelligence. Seems like we've done a couple of shows on it, but always we seem to have a guest with a bit of a different perspective. Does artificial intelligence and chatbots have a place in policing? Well, Axon put together a report writing system called Draft One. It avoids some of the obvious potential pitfalls, but if we don't adapt the systems, how are they affecting law enforcement? So when we use them, we choose to use them, whether it's in report writing or in real-time crime centers. We set the ground rules, but sometimes if we don't engage, the ground rules get set for us. Well, today, my guest is retired Nebraska Chief Philip Lukens. Philip Lukens began his policing career in 1995, and both the chief and the Alliance Police Department have been widely recognized for innovative and creative policing initiatives. The Alliance Police Department received the CALIA accreditation on July 29th of last year, and Chief Lukens was recently selected as a member of the 2023 National Institute of Justice, the NIJ Law Enforcement Advancing Data and Science Leads Program cohort. He remains committed to evidence-based, human-centered policing. Well, welcome to Policing Matters, Chief Philip Lukens.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I was looking at your article. It's really interesting. We've posted it in the show notes below. Our listeners or our viewers can take a look at it for themselves. I'm going to ask you some questions about it. First of all, tell us about your introduction to the AI issues. How'd you get involved?
Well, I think it's kind of like what a lot of other chiefs experience and a lot of police departments across the nation. And that was I had an extreme staff shortage. And I was scrambling to try and figure out how we were going to address crime and quality of life issues. And at the same time, cover the street. And our call volume was extremely high. And so I had to start looking for other things that we could do so that way we could really have our officers not reduce the level of services that we were providing to the community. And so a lot of it was just learning on the go and a lot of research and reaching out to a lot of vendors and actually building some of these things myself. So that way we could utilize what we needed to get the job done.
Yeah. And so, yeah, oftentimes, and I know we've had it, the trouble at my old department in San Francisco PD, where we'd buy off the shelf different things and they did not integrate well together. Hopefully, you're making those things work. And as new systems pop up, it's really difficult. And budget wise, it's almost impossible sometimes to get rid of a whole system and introduce something new. So I want to ask you right now, are all your systems plug and play? Are they compatible with each other?
Well, for the most part, and I think that's what we're trying to get even further on, is utilizing APIs to get everything to talk to one another. I think in general, police departments and cities across the nation battle with silos where you may have a finance program, and I know there are some programs like Central Square and Spillman or Tyler where they cross-pollinate between different city departments, but many municipalities only use one for maybe policing and another one for the water billing or whatnot. And so what's happening is there are APIs that we can set up so that way this information is able to cross-pollinate. I think as we go forward in the future, it's too difficult for any one vendor to make everything perfect for the individual agency. And so we're going to end up having to utilize APIs throughout, and there's going to be a conglomerate of multiple softwares talking with one another. And that was the issue that I experienced, is there were just simply softwares that we couldn't get certain things to do what we wanted them to do, and therefore we had to build something else and then have an interface so it could talk. And so some of that, we think about it as just as predictive policing, but some of the other aspects are just getting the reports to be providing information, like our PARI representative, so we could get mental health services or chemical dependency services to people on calls for service. Instead of just having a co-responder program, we actually set up that all of our calls for service, if there were alcohol or chemical dependency whatsoever suspected to be involved, it didn't matter if it was a barking dog or any other type of call, then those reports were generated, and that gave our PARI representative the ability to chase that down. But that's just one example where we had to customize and make a system to be able to do that.
Yeah, and you talk about predictive policing, and that's a large part of the article that we've got linked below. You've used it to bring down crime rates. How'd you manage that?
Well, I think that when we talk about predictive policing, I think it's a scary word, because sometimes we talk about hotspot policing, we think of some of the troubles that we saw in California or Illinois and so forth. What were the issues surrounding that? When I'm talking about predictive policing, we want to talk about evidence-based. But I want us to think about the layered approach that goes with that. And what I mean by that is, we didn't just say, okay, this is an area where there's a high crime or high call volume. I want cars in the area. I want patrol cars to be here for 15 minutes with their lights on, some of those types of things, or I want people making heavy contacts in this area. Instead, we looked at it from a layered approach, and that might be, maybe we put a decoy patrol car in the area. Maybe we set up a community program for that neighborhood. We had different beats, and so the officer that was assigned that neighborhood maybe would establish a community meeting. And I don't say maybe, all of these things actually were different layers. So we gathered the data for predictive policing. We gathered the data for and gathering with the community members themselves in the beat meetings. Then after we had the community meetings, we also had the PARI program, and we had some other programs that we were working on as well, especially like in the hotels. We had a hotel partnership in that hotel district. But nonetheless, all of these types of programs, you have all of these layers together. So we're not just putting cops in an area to be in the right place at the right time to just catch the person, if you will, but we're doing a lot of proactive efforts. So that way we're not really having an over-policing issue. The residents or the businesses would ask us for decoy cars or the camera trailer. We could bring those things to the area when we knew that we had crime. And then, of course, we still had ghost calls that we programmed into our system that the officers would get dispatched to. So a lot of hotspot policing, if you will, is, okay, we want you to go hit this box, if you will, for 15 minutes at 10 o'clock. But instead, what we did is we program those calls into the dispatch system, so that way the officers weren't responsible for remembering that, but the dispatchers would, when it popped up in the queue, would dispatch the officers on those calls. And then obviously, call permitting, if they got tied up, that might hold for an hour, but then we knew, hey, the calls were pending, and that's why that response was delayed or whatnot. And so there's a lot of things. Then you look at the design, environmental design, they talk about crime reduction. And that's yet another aspect where, we can start to look at, does the park need more lighting? Do we need to clean the area up? Do we need to get code enforcement out here? What is it? And so all of that together really built that system where we watched our crime ratchet down. But it was all based off of looking at the data and saying, here's a problem. Now let's figure out how we're going to tackle it with all the layers. And then we tackled it.
Yeah, I mean, great stuff there. Crime prevention through environmental design. Yeah, I am a believer, and I really know that it works. I've used it. And we've had Dr. Tamara Harold from Washington, D.C. and Las Vegas come on the show to talk about crime-based places that every cop in every city will tell you they know the top 10 spots. But you're talking about the analytics, the layer of analytics that say, it's not, this isn't a problem because those 10 calls are about a barking dog or some other low level call for service. Do you have a system where you can filter out or filter in just searches for robberies or burglaries or things like that?
Well, you can do that within almost any RMS system. And you can pull that out, whether you're using Crystal Reports or whether you maybe use Microsoft Power BI, or you just use like a JSON file and export it. But regardless, within whatever RMS you have, you can start to adjust those filters to say, we want to be careful with that. I was real cautious about putting in too many filters. I didn't want filters where it was counter reports at the police department and some of those things, which would obviously make the police department look like a high crime area, right? So you do have a level of that, but really I wanted the practice of my officers traveling the streets and patrolling, because evidence-based predictive policing in general, we know that when a patrol car is on patrol in an area, it assists in suppressing crime. And so we want to have them constantly being in the area. And that's where you can end up with the over-policing issues, is understanding the difference between the barking dog and the burglary and what is appropriate. And so, yeah, if we have somebody that's always calling in a barking dog, and then we have cops that are circling the area all the time, the person that's calling in the barking dog might feel happy, but you might have a lot of other neighbors going, why are you always in our neighborhood? And it could be motivated out of, ulterior motives. So those are some of the things that you do want to look for, but that's why the community programs and everything else associated with that, those layers matter, because if you don't have the layers, it doesn't work as well. And in fact, I would be more, I guess I would be a bigger proponent in saying less filters, more layers, if that makes any sense. More things collaborating together versus filtering out some of those low-level calls, because I do think they do have merit in getting the officers in the area. And then back to the chemical dependency issues, oftentimes what we were finding for follow-up, yes, sometimes it would be a domestic violence incident or something of that nature, but you would be surprised how many calls where we had somebody that just reporting a barking dog or a neighborhood issue or whatever, where we defined that there was another issue going on. And then we're able to start connecting people to resources, whether it was unemployment or anything else. And so I wouldn't want to push that type of ability away, because I think that all contributes to the crime reduction. Unfortunately, it doesn't give me a very good data point to say this exactly is the case, right? I can tell that at one point, our PARI coordinator had to be on leave due to a tragedy. And for 1 month, we watched crime go up 8% in 1 month. Boom, it just happened because we weren't handling some of the other layers. We were still doing some of the predictive policing, but the other layers weren't occurring, which I think is important.
Yeah. Well, the devil's in the details. We know that. So we talked a little bit about integration. What kind of infrastructure did you need to initially start up, or did you have most of the tools already available?
Well, I think I really capitalized on our RMS. And I think that that's one of the things that you need to be able to do. But no, we utilized other softwares. Obviously, we had camera ALPRs we installed in the community. We also had some cameras that we started placing in open space. And so each of those come with an associated software. And now we start talking about the silos. How do we get all of this together? It's not the same manufacturer as our body cams. And so then we have that's coming together as well. And then people are providing us information. And these are a lot of the things that, we were able to build some things customized, and other things, like I said, we use that different vendor software. Unfortunately, if you don't have that collaboration where you start using the AI, for example, for like object recognition, you put an officer in front of a computer for 3, 8, 10 hours trying to stream through video to try and find something for a suspect, it becomes incredibly difficult. So utilizing an AI that can say, find me a white pickup, and it shows you 10 spots in the video, you're able to do that. That was associated with the products that we had on some of our video. And then I found that I was able to utilize a platform and make my own for video that came to us, because that was great for the video that was in the system, not great for somebody saying, here's my doorbell footage, right? And now you're sitting there trying to run through it, and it's like, okay, we don't have what we need. So there was always that juggle of customization, and you can utilize a lot of products, even on Microsoft, that you can build upon to do a lot of that, which I don't think a lot of police departments in general even realize that that's available to them. And I kind of label these guys, and maybe it's kind of on a sidetrack, but I call it the big four. You have Amazon, AWS, you have Microsoft, you have why am I drawing a blank? IBM and Google, right? And almost anything that anybody is providing as a product is probably using one of those platforms. And so police departments also have the ability to do that. And so in my situation, we had very limited budget. So it comes down to, I need to build something, or I need this interface myself to be able to accomplish what we're trying to get to.
Mm-hmm. And so what was the reception like from the troops? Were they suspicious of this, or did they see the benefit that maybe they'd spend less time there?
Well, I've really established with my staff that my job was to make their job easier. I believe part of our police retention recruitment issues are because we put too much pressure on the first line supervisors and too much pressure on our line officers to be too perfect. And it's too hard in an ambiguous job. And so we need to take some of those mundane things away so they can focus on being the people we want them to be and interacting with the community the way we want them to. When we give them stresses of paperwork and everything else, that begins to pull that away from them and really distract them. And so I let them know, hey, this is a system to make your life easier. And then when they saw it work, it was just kind of self-fulfilling. They see, oh, wow, this really made a difference for me, and I'm raring to go. So
Nice.
I didn't have a problem with this, with the staff wanting to try these things out.
That's great. Well, you're in Nebraska, I'm in California, and we've had objections to almost every new piece of technology we try to pull out. And we've even had the governor declare that we couldn't use certain kinds of AI. What challenges have you had? Have you had any objections from either the public or the media on whatever you're using there?
Well, absolutely. We had individuals that were not excited about the fact that there were going to be cameras. We had people saying, what are you going to do about all these issues in the open space or in the parks? Get some cameras out there. And then we had just as many people saying, don't you dare spy on us and put a bunch of cameras out. And so we had the Police Citizens Advisory Board, and I really made that open to the community. And so it wasn't just people that were designated by City Council to be on this board. We invited all of the community members, all of the stakeholders we could possibly get in a room. And we talked together. We came up with a plan. We came up with a policy. I didn't just put a policy out. Our community members helped us write that policy, helped us come up with some plans on that. But the other side of that is the responsibility in what you do. So one of the things that I did was I maintained an open door policy. Our communications dispatch center runs 24/7. So I said, if you want to come and get a tour, now it might give us, obviously there's some security and confidentiality of like, NIBRS, NCIC, some of these things that we can't have up while people are getting a tour, but we can arrange, give us a few minutes and we'll get you through. You can see what our camera system looks like. You can see what people are looking at, etc. We had like 3 people that actually came and took tours, and that word spread like wildfire, and people were very satisfied with the fact that we maintained an open door policy. But the other part of that I say is responsibility. And so I see, you think about Microsoft has a moratorium on facial recognition software right now, right? And they've had that for several years. They just reiterated it a couple of weeks ago. It was in the news, or maybe some time back even then. But regardless, they just reiterated it. And then you get from there police departments that say, well, Microsoft doesn't have it, so we just use Clearview AI, and we just go to another. Now, I'm not making fun of any vendor. What I'm trying to point out is the issue that you have one major software company who's saying, look, we have some concerns that there's some disparity in the algorithms. And then you, as a police department, then just jump to the next thing. I think that erodes trust that we don't really want to have happen. And so, sorry, excuse me. My standpoint has always been, let's pump the brakes on the things that are extremely controversial And let's work on these back-end systems. There's so many other aspects can be worked on. Do I believe that facial recognition is important for policing? Absolutely. Do I see it for the border crisis? Do I see it for human trafficking? I see a lot of issues where facial recognition has value. But if we put more emphasis on catching that one burglar or that one robber, and we're not dealing with the other 50% of our cold property crimes, and we're not having those case clearance ratios better, I think that causes the poor taste in the mouth of the citizens.
Mhm.
And so I think, again, it's a conglomerate.
Yeah, so I want to talk about some of your successes, but first I'd like to take a moment and thank our sponsor. As we explore the future of law enforcement technology, let's focus on Skydio, a leader in U.S. autonomous drone innovation. Headquarters in San Mateo, California, and manufactured in Hayward, California, Skydio uses cutting edge AI and robotics to develop drones that significantly boost the operational efficiency and safety of law enforcement agencies. Trusted by industry authorities and supported by prominent investors such as Andreessen Horowitz and NVIDIA, Skydio sets the benchmark for quality and security in drone technology. Discover how Skydio's advanced aerial surveillance capabilities are revolutionizing policing across the nation at skydio.com. That's Skydio, SKYDIO.com. All right, and we're back, and I'm speaking with retired Chief Philip Lukens. And what's your network like? Are you only analyzing the crime within your own city? Are you working in the region, a broader area? You talked about silos in the electronics, but in law enforcement, we tend to work in silos too. And we might have a prolific burglar dry up and disappear and not take a look at the neighboring city and see that they've got a huge spike in burglaries. We need to do better, don't we? Are you doing that?
Well, I really wanted to try and get there. I think there are a lot of agencies that are apprehensive still of working together. I think in general, some of that is expense. So we had interest with other agencies if we could get grant money to assist with that process. As you're aware, I think in the beginning of 2024, roughly some point, there was a request by some of the legislating body that went to the either the DOJ or NIJ, I can't remember offhand, but regardless, they said, hey, we don't want to be funding any types of grants right now that are going to be using artificial intelligence. And that's very broad and that's very vague. But that's scary because agencies don't have the ability to participate. They don't have the money. And then they can't even get grant money to help with that. So I think that there's a little bit of an issue there. But I want to say how essential it is and why we have to do it going forward. As we start to integrate chatbots into law enforcement, we all understand that the algorithms, to some extent, are a black box. And so we have to put in input into the algorithm and how that neural network actually learns that information. We're not 100% sure, but we can see the outcome of what it does. If we can make the quote unquote artificial perfect world, where we're putting that information in, we train the chatbot not to have the biases and not to have the other issues. The difficulty and expense that goes into doing that in one framework is incredibly hard. And so you have to have agencies that are significantly, well capitalized to be able to do that. If we are able to build a federated network with multiple agencies working together, using the same chatbots, but isolating, and then all of a sudden we begin to have this chatbot that is very contemporary, that's useful to everybody. And then we can have our individual customization. So what does that look like? I could take this chatbot, which I've made one, and I'm happy to share. I would really love to collaborate with other agencies, but you put in your department policy, you put in city ordinance, you put in city policy, state law, federal law, and then you could make that an interactive chatbot that your officers use, your sergeants run the reports past to see if we had a policy violation. Do we need to go do something again? I think we always get worried that this is where we're going to jam up our cops, but that's not what we're looking for. Instead, it is, hey, we failed to give a victim's right pamphlet, or we didn't do a neighborhood canvas on this call. Things that sometimes get missed. And
Hmm.
instead, the chatbot can look at everything and say, this wasn't done. Boom, we take care of it. So now that AI is really helping us to benefit. And if we're doing that cross-pollination, we're not displacing crime from one city to another, but now we're actually working collaboratively to bring the crime and suppress it in the region and beyond. And I think that's what we're trying to look at. I mean, you think of the opioid epidemic, right? And, you think of the likes of ODMAP, where all of us were pushing out our data when we're having, fentanyl overdoses. But what if we were all utilizing AI to test the sewage across all of the cities, and we could tell where the spikes are already, and that data is just coming to everybody, and nobody's having to work on building these reports? Think of how much faster, more reliable that would be to really help us as a whole, as a nation and beyond, worldwide. How are we working on that issue?
Yeah, I know you bring up a good point there that we've done that here in California and in San Francisco, where the Department of Public Health actually studies the sewage data to see the concentration levels of disease or opioids in the water and the sewage. So we're not only talking about our region of other law enforcement agencies, but also other departments that could be helpful in solving some of the problems.
Oh, you're absolutely right. I think oftentimes one of the phrases you will hear across the board in law enforcement is this really a police issue?
Yeah.
And in many cases, it's not, but we're kind of the catch-all. But if we start to break down these silos by utilizing these networks where we can be conveying information, that whole world changes. We do need to be in the know. We do need to have a seat at the table, but we don't always necessarily need to be the ones that are the responders or the actors. And if we can help facilitate that and orchestrate that better, I think that we'll see tremendous success.
Yeah, for sure. Not only the drug issues, the homelessness issues, the mental health issues, all of it. Yeah, it's a good one to collaborate on all of those. You talk about your BWC, your body worn camera project, loading straight to the cloud and then having access by your prosecutors. Will you be integrating it into a report writing system, or are you doing it already? I talked about Axon a little bit. Axon, I looked at their draft one system, looks great. Different agencies have different policies. Sometimes their officers can't even look at the footage before they write the report. How are you doing it there?
Well, so what we set up was it just automatically did a transcription. And then the officers could look at the transcription, they cut and paste that into their report, and they could make any adjustments that needed to be. Now, looking forward, as this continues to evolve, and this is rapidly evolving, Axon's not the only one. In fact, I even built a system because it's so expensive for police departments to start integrating some of these. And again, I don't want to go against any one vendor because they're all trying to help policing, and it's not against the vendor. But I can tell you from being an administrator, sometimes you're looking at it, I don't have the money to do what we need to do here. And so I built a system that was basically the cost of the cloud. And so you can just put a video in, and it doesn't have to be your body worn. It can be your Ring doorbell. It can be anything, and it'll transcribe it. So I know that that's out there. Now, keep that in mind as we talk about this going forward. The ability for us, when we introduce evidence in court, body cam footage is not an officer report. It's body cam footage. And if we have a blood result, it's a blood result as a point of evidence. And I think we're going to have to get to the place that I know that they utilize these things for suppression hearings, but we actually are probably going to get to a place, I'm not sure where in the future, but it's going to happen, I really think. And that is the police report, the transcription is going to be the transcription. And that's going to be another piece of evidence, just like it was body cam footage. And the officer isn't going to be writing reports, and they are going to testify based on what they put together to put in the case. And why that is I think that we have a huge risk of confabulation. We already know with the Brady issues that, and I can't remember offhand, don't stink me, but it's something like 50% of people, or a large percentage of people that are Brady officers that have been put on the Brady list, were clerical accidental errors that they testified to. When you start implementing a whole bunch of body cam transcription. An officer's tired, they work 16 hours, they're tired, they push it through. Sergeant isn't able to get off until they review the officer's report, especially in these smaller departments. The sergeant passes it through, sends it through, and there's a transcription error in this report that the officer swore to, purported, that was accurate. And now that officer is going to become a Brady officer. They go testify in court. So the confabulation issue, or the officer, misunderstanding something, way too big of a risk. We have way too many issues going in policing where we cannot be affording to lose good cops over clerical mistakes. And especially when you're implementing AI, it can't happen. And so I really, really recommend police departments have to differentiate. You get body cam footage, that's evidence. You get a transcription, that's evidence. And it's not the officer's report, it's the transcription. You can utilize the transcription, use AI again to do a summarization of the transcription, because no prosecutor wants a 30-page transcription to try and read through to see if there's PC. So what you need to do is have a summarization to ensure that your elements are there, and you can have the chatbot do these types of things. And already been done. This isn't like, we're thinking futuristic. It's here. We can do it. So the thing is you utilize that, and then that too is another piece of evidence that's put together. And now if an officer is going to swear to a warrant of an affidavit, they could copy and paste some of that information that needs to be denoted in the warrant that this has come from the chatbot, but I have verified it. And I think that if we distill it down enough, the chances of having those clerical errors are a big issue. I mean, we just can't risk, as we get into this AI world, losing more cops over situations that absolutely they should not be lost to. And I think that's where officers and the unions kind of raise their eyebrows and say, wait a second, what are you doing here? We don't want to get in trouble. And that's fair. And I think it's our job as administrators to make sure that we're taking care of our staff and saying, we want to watch out for this and make sure that this doesn't become an issue going forward.
Yeah, so the human element remains. It's not only does the transcription just put every detail that they hear, but we're missing out on nuances like body language, nonverbal communication, things like that. And yeah, I mean, unfortunately, an officer may end up on the Brady list, but we also could lose a really valuable case as well.
Right. And all of those issues, I think are tremendous. And when we think about, like, you can utilize sentiment analysis to find, some of this body language, but I think we do have the propensity to end up with a technology bias that's coming. I think of a very quick example. I was taking my girls run track, and they had to be taken to a track place, and they run year round. So it's always somewhere, and the coach is always changing it. So the coach gives the kids this place where they're supposed to meet. And I've never been there. I don't know where it's at. So I'm trying to find it. And I keep asking my kids, where's this at? They call the coach. The coach says, this is the location. They plug it in GPS. This is the address. I said, let me see that phone. And I look at it and I say, something's not right. That's a neighborhood. That does not look like open space. And my kid said, no. He said, right past those houses is where the open space starts. I said, I don't see it. I looked. We drove straight to that place. Absolutely was not the place. I called the coach, said, give me cross streets, main arteries, and I'll find it. Of course, gave it to me, boom, we got right there. And that's, my kids were going, but that's what it said, and this is what I see. And we have that risk with the younger generation for sure. And that's the other part of that, is watching out for that.
Yeah, for sure. I had a similar situation. I was in Reno for a conference, and it sent me to Las Vegas, a quick trip, and I was walking.
Yeah.
So let me ask you, I am so grateful to you for taking time and talking with us. We got this together really quickly. I want to ask you about autonomous systems like ALPRs are constantly buffering, reading. We've got LiDAR that's constantly buffering and reading. Are we ever going to have fully autonomous systems, whether they be drones that are deploying on their own, or they're going ahead of radio calls, real-time crime centers, setting off alarms saying there's a robbery happening here. Are we moving to that?
I think we're there. I think it's happening. We already can't think of the software where, they're deploying it in schools. They already, I've toured a couple real-time crime centers as a CALIA assessor, and they already have it where some of these agencies are utilizing it just to spot on camera if somebody has a gun in certain areas, right? And so that's running 24/7. That thing is autonomous. And if an alert pops up, it pops up. ALPRs have been around 15 years. I mean, back in the day when I was a street supervisor, I had one of the first ALPR cars in our agency, and I used that thing all over the place. All it did was gather data. I think where we're going to run into the issue is what is going to be mandated with data being purged. And I think that there's going to become a point when how much is too much. And, in this day and age, nobody cares that you go and respond on a barking dog and you write a report about it. I do think that in the future, there are going to start being purge dates on when these barking dog reports, any type of information you have in your record system, your RMS, actually gets purged. Because there comes a point where privacy is, wait a second, do you have every dot and tittle on my life for the last 70 years? And at what point does that become authoritarian state and not constitutional? And so I do see that it's already here. I already see that we're seeing it with the ALPRs. You can already put drones up in autonomous systems. The other scary part of that is the spyware and the inability of some agencies they're implementing devices that may not be clean. And I think that could be very problematic. And so getting back into having an autonomous system, think about that, an autonomous system that is spooling all this data, but that data is also going into the hands of somebody that we don't want it to be in. So it's here. We need to be more responsible with it. We're going to learn on the go because that's what policing always is. This ship is always at sea, and we just have to keep working on directing it. But I think that there are a lot of, key individuals that, I'm working with, folks like yourself even, where we're trying to get this information out there so we can help people make the best decisions going forward.
Yeah, for sure. And to your point about the drones, every law enforcement agency wanted the cheapest drone available. Well, most of them came from the same place, and now we are replacing the majority of those on the fly. As you say, I mean, sometimes technology is there before our policies, and sometimes we're acting after the fact. But it's great to have people like you thinking about it and creating systems and troubleshooting some of the existing ones. Really appreciate your time today. Retired Chief Philip Lukens. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. And if anybody ever wants to collaborate, feel free to reach out, and I'm always happy to collaborate with other agencies.
Awesome. And to our listeners, you can find the link to Chief Lukens' article on AI and all the things that he's done there in Nebraska. Thanks for listening. Check in, drop me a line. Let me know what you think. Drop me a line at policingmatters@police1.com. And take good care, stay safe, and hope to talk to you soon.